Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to start with a scenario that I think is going to feel uncomfortably familiar to a lot of you. It's 3:00 a.m., you're staring at the ceiling, you can't sleep, and you are running this mental checklist of if only, you know the ones I'm talking about, I'll finally be happy if I get that promotion, or I'll stop being so anxious once I have X amount in the bank, or
Yeah.
maybe I'll be at peace when my toxic boss finally gets transferred to another department.
The if-only trap. It's the universal human condition, isn't it? We operate under this heavy assumption that our internal state, our happiness, our peace, our sense of worth is being held hostage by our external circumstances.
Totally. We feel like leaves blowing in the wind, just hoping for a calm day so we can finally settle down.
Yeah, exactly.
And frankly, it's exhausting to live that way.
Mm.
But today, we are pivoting hard away from that narrative. We're looking at a stack of sources that argue the exact opposite, and I have to warn you, and the listener, right up front, the core thesis here is, it's radical. It borders on offensive if you catch it on a bad day.
It really does. It requires a complete inversion of how we usually see the world.
It's the idea that we are quite literally the makers of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances don't shape us, they reveal us. To unpack this, we are diving into the collected wisdom of James Allen. Now, for a lot of people, that name is vague. They might know him as a man thinketh the guy, maybe the grandfather of the self-help movement.
Right.
But looking at his biography, he isn't some modern guru tweeting generic advice from a sterile studio, is he?
Far from it. And I think that context is crucial because otherwise his advice can sound like toxic positivity or just out-of-touch elitism. We need to ground him. We are talking late 19th, early 20th century. Allen was born in Leicester, England, into a working-class family, and his life was touched by genuine, gritty tragedy very early on.
Right. This part of the notes really changed how I read the text. It wasn't just abstract philosophy for him.
No. His father, in a desperate bid to find work during a massive economic downturn in England, traveled alone to America to New York City, planning to make enough money to send for the family. But within 2 days of arriving in New York, his father was robbed and murdered.
That is absolutely devastating.
It was catastrophic. James was only 15 years old. He had to leave school immediately to work in a factory to support his grieving family. So when we read his words about overcoming poverty or mastering your destiny or finding peace in chaos, these aren't abstract theories from an ivory tower. These are what he called hard-earned facts. He wrote these philosophies essentially from the factory floor, trying to make sense of a brutal world.
That gives so much more weight to his words. He's not saying think positive because he's had it easy.
No, he's saying it because it was his survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Precisely. And our mission today is to explore his complete collection, focusing heavily on works like From Poverty to Power, 8 Pillars of Prosperity, and Byways to Blessedness. We aren't just looking for fluff or affirmations. We are looking for what I like to call his architecture of character. He argues there are specific structural pillars required to build a life that doesn't collapse when the storm hits.
Okay, so let's get into the blueprint. The first big concept, and arguably the most controversial, is this idea of the world as a mirror. Allen writes, the world is a reflex of mental states. It sounds a bit esoteric, maybe even a bit Matrix-y. Can we break down what he actually means by that in plain English?
It is his foundational philosophy. He's saying that what we experience out there is actually a projection of what's going on in here. He uses this powerful analogy of a dark room. Imagine you are in a pitch black room. You keep bumping into the furniture, stubbing your toe, hitting your shins against the table.
And naturally, my reaction would be to get angry at the chair.
Right. You'd say, this chair is out to get me, or why is this table in my way? You might even try to move the furniture around in the dark to make it safer. But Allen argues that if you are suffering or constantly running into conflict, it's not the furniture's fault. You are living in the dark room of your own mind. You can't rearrange the furniture of the world to stop hurting you. You have to turn on the light. The light in this case is wisdom and understanding.
There was a story in the source material that illustrated this perfectly. The story of the Naturalist and the Plowman. I loved this visual because it shows two people looking at the exact same thing but seeing two different realities.
Oh, it's a classic. So you have a naturalist, a man of science and curiosity, roaming the country lanes. He comes across this pool of brackish, muddy water near a farmyard. To most people, it's gross. It's stagnant water. But he fills a bottle with it, excited to look at it under his microscope. He turns to a farmhand, a son of the plow, as Allen calls him, and starts talking of how this pool contains 1,000,000 universes, teeming with life and wonder.
And the farmhand looks at him like he's lost his mind.
Exactly. The farmhand says, I know the water be full of tadpoles, but they be easy to catch.
It's funny, but it's deep. Two men, same object. One sees a universe of wonder, the other sees a mud puddle with tadpoles.
And that is the lesson. The object, the pool, was neutral. The value of the object was determined entirely by the mind viewing it. Alan's point is that we do this with everything. We do it with our jobs, our bank accounts, our relationships. If you see your life as a mud puddle, that's not a fact of life. That's a fact of your mind.
I want to push back on this a little bit, though, because it's one thing to talk about a puddle or a perspective shift. It's another thing to talk about serious life events. If I lose my job, or if I go broke, or if I get sick, that's a tangible negative fact. Is Alan really saying that's just in my head? Because that feels a bit like victim blaming.
That is the common critique, and it's a fair one to raise. This is where Alan distinguishes between the event and the reaction. He addresses this with a specific case study about two men and a bank failure. It feels very relevant to anyone who has ever lost money or faced a financial crisis.
Walk us through that.
So, Alan describes two men who both lose their life savings in a bank crash. The event is identical. The financial loss is identical. But the outcome is radically different. One man falls into absolute despondency. He complains about his bad luck. He worries himself sick. He blames the bankers. And he remains poor and bitter. He becomes, in Alan's words, a tool of adverse circumstances.
The other guy.
The other guy reads the news, realizes the money is gone, and says, paraphrasing here, well, it's gone. Worrying won't bring it back, but hard work will. And he gets to work. He rebuilds his prosperity.
So Alan's argument is that the bank crash itself was a dead effect. It had no power on its own.
Precisely. The cause of their future wasn't the lost money, it was the mental reaction to the loss. One clothed the event in dark, weak thoughts and got darkness. The other clothed it in energy and resilience and got success.
It's empowering, but also terrifying because it removes the victim card. You can't just say, well, the economy's bad. You have to ask, how am I mentally framing the economy?
And that leads us to the practical question. If it is all in our heads, how do we actually build a better framework? We can't just wish for a better attitude. We need a structure.
Right. And this brings us to the core of this deep dive, the 8 pillars of prosperity. I really like this section because he moves from abstract philosophy to a literal construction metaphor. He talks about building a temple of prosperity.
Yes, he says prosperity is like a roof. It gives you shelter, comfort, protection. Everyone wants the roof. But you cannot have a roof hanging in midair. It needs supports. It needs a foundation and pillars. If you try to have the comfort of the roof without the discipline of the pillars, the whole thing crashes down.
So let's walk through these pillars. He breaks them down into the corner pillars, the essential supports, and then the central pillars. Let's start with the first corner pillar, energy. Now, is he talking about like having a lot of caffeine or just physical fitness?
No, not quite. He defines energy as rousing oneself. It's the opposite of stagnation. It includes promptitude and vigilance. He draws this sharp contrast between the active man and the lazy man. The lazy man is still sitting there talking about how hard the task is going to be, planning, worrying, procrastinating. Meanwhile, the active man has already finished it.
It's the difference between, I should probably do that eventually, and it's done.
Exactly. It's the refusal to stagnate. Then you have the second pillar, economy. Now, usually when we hear economy, we think of penny pinching or being cheap. But Alan has a very specific definition here. He views economy as the concentration of power.
This part was interesting. He talks about avoiding harmful luxuries. What counts as a harmful luxury in this context?
He's talking about things that disperse your energy, gambling, excessive drinking, aimless distractions. He argues that economy is about conserving your capital, both your money and your mental energy, so you can direct it toward your main purpose. If you are scattering your attention and money on frivolous things, you have no power left for the big things. It's about moderation.
Then we have the third pillar, which feels like the heavy hitter, integrity.
The adamantine pillar, he calls it. This is unswerving honesty. And the key here, and this is where it gets hard, is keeping promises regardless of loss or gain.
That's the kicker. It's easy to be honest when it's convenient, but he's talking about when it hurts.
Right. Alan asks, if you promise to do something and you realize halfway through that doing it is going to cost you money or time, do you still do it? He argues that there is no cheap bargain with prosperity.
Yeah.
If you build on fraud or even just slight deception, you are building on sand. It might look like a house for a while, but the structural integrity is zero. It will collapse.
And the fourth corner pillar is system. This one resonated with me because I'm naturally a bit disorganized. He uses a very strong phrase here: confusion is annihilation.
It sounds dramatic, but think about it. He uses the analogy of nature. He says, a snowflake is as perfect as a star. The universe runs on absolute mathematical order. There is no chaos in nature's laws. Gravity doesn't take a day off. So if you want your life to be strong, it must be systematized.
So this is about being organized.
It's deeper than just a clean desk. It's about not having your mental energy drained by disorder. If your affairs are a mess, your mind is a mess. System is what allows you to handle big responsibilities without breaking.
It's funny because energy, economy, integrity, system, these sound like standard business advice. You can read this in Forbes today. But Alan doesn't frame them as business tactics, does he?
No, and that's the crucial distinction. To Alan, these are moral virtues. You can't separate the mathematical from the moral. He argues that being disorganized isn't just a quirky personality trait. It's a moral failing because it leads to confusion and inefficiency that harms others. Being lazy isn't just a lifestyle choice. It's a vice that leads to decay. He sees business success and spiritual success as coming from the exact same root, character.
Okay, so we have the four corners holding up the roof. Now we move to the central pillars, which he says add beauty and strength. We have sympathy, sincerity, impartiality, and self-reliance. We probably don't have time to deep dive into all of them, but self-reliance seems huge for him.
It is vital. He talks about standing alone, not in a lonely, isolated way, but in a way where you don't need external props to hold you up. You rely on your inner light. If your boss criticizes you, or the market crashes, or your friends doubt you, you don't crumble because your validation comes from your own integrity, not from their applause.
And sympathy seems to be the balance to that. Otherwise, you just become a jerk who doesn't care what anyone thinks.
Yes, exactly. Sympathy is about removing the barrier of self to understand others. It's unselfishness. You need the self-reliance to be strong, but you need sympathy to be good.
So we have these 8 pillars, but a pile of bricks isn't a wall. I asked myself reading this, what holds this all together? And the sources talk about the glue of the structure.
Yes, the binding mortar. Alan identifies this as virtue and thoroughness, especially thoroughness. He has this great line: thoroughness consists in doing little things as though they were the greatest things in the world.
That brings us back to the builder metaphor again.
Right. Imagine a bricklayer. If he places one brick slightly off, just a fraction of an inch, and he ignores the plumb line because, hey, it's just one brick, who cares? What happens?
By the time the wall is 10 feet high, it's leaning over.
Exactly. That tiny error has become a massive slant and the wall falls. Alan says our lives are the same. If we ignore the plumb line of rectitude in the small things, a little white lie, a little cut corner, a task left half done, we are building a slant into our character. Eventually, the whole life crashes.
That is such a powerful image. It shifts the focus from, I need to do one giant heroic thing to fix my life, to, I need to send this one email correctly.
Precisely. And that transitions us perfectly to the next section of his work, Byways to Blessedness, which is all about the practical application. Because it can feel overwhelming to think about building a temple of prosperity.
Totally. I'm thinking, I just want to get through Tuesday without screaming. So where does Alan suggest we start?
He is obsessed with beginnings and little things. If you feel overwhelmed, his advice is, fix your morning.
The morning routine. It's timeless advice, but what's his specific take on it?
He says, begin the day by rising early. Even if you have nothing specific to do, get up, go for a walk. The morning sets the tone. If you start the day rushing, chaotic, hitting snooze, and behind schedule, you have sown a seed of confusion. That confusion will grow throughout the day. If you start with calm, deliberate action, you sow a seed of peace.
He also warns about the trap of waiting for big things. I think a lot of us do this. We wait for the big break, the big project, the big moment to show what we can do. I'll be thorough when I'm CEO, but right now I'm just an intern, so it doesn't matter.
And Alan calls that a delusion. He quotes Confucius. Eat at your own table as you would at the table of a king.
I love that quote. What does it mean in practice?
It means bring your highest level of manners, gratitude, and thoroughness to your solitary Tuesday night dinner. Why? Because you are practicing the quality of your character. Alan says perfection in the small task leads to perfection in the whole. If you are a shirker in small duties, if you leave the dishes, if you dodge the difficult phone call, you will be miserable. He actually says the shirker is the most miserable of men.
That hits hard. It really creates a paradox of happiness, doesn't it? We usually think happiness comes from getting what we want.
But Alan argues you cannot find happiness by seeking it directly. That is selfish, and selfishness is the root of misery. You find happiness by losing yourself in the perfection of your work and the service of others.
There was a story about a woman in the sources, a woman who seemed incredibly fortunate.
Yes, her friends would say, oh, she's so lucky, everything she wishes for just comes to her. It seemed like magic. But Alan points out the reality. She hadn't just wished. She had worked for years on her inward state. She had built that temple of prosperity we talked about, brick by brick, controlling her temper, practicing kindness, being thorough. Her good fortune was simply the external reflection of her internal order. She attracted success because she was successful.
It goes back to the mirror. Her bright room wasn't an accident. She had installed the lights.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really critical point about how we view suffering. Alan doesn't view poverty or sorrow as punishments from a cruel universe.
This is the corrective lesson idea. This is the part that I think people struggle with the most.
It is a tough pill to swallow, but it's liberating. He suggests that if you are suffering or in poverty, whether that's financial poverty or poverty of spirit, loneliness, anxiety, it is a sign that you are ignoring a law of life. It's like the child playing with fire. The burn isn't a punishment from a vengeful God. It's a lesson. Fire burns.
So if I'm constantly having conflicts with people, the lesson isn't people are annoying.
Right. The lesson might be, I lack the pillar of sympathy. Or I lack the pillar of impartiality. The conflict is a signal to look inward and see which brick is missing from your foundation.
That completely flips the script on victimhood. It turns every bad day into a diagnostics check.
Diagnostic is the perfect word. It's engineering. If the bridge wobbles, you don't yell at the wind, you check the struts. If your life wobbles, check your pillars.
So let's bring this all together. We've covered a lot of ground. We started with the idea that the world is a mirror, a reflex of our mental states. If we see a mud puddle or a universe, that's on us.
Then we talked about the structure. Prosperity isn't luck. It's a roof supported by pillars. Energy, economy, integrity, system, and those deeper moral pillars like sympathy and self-reliance.
And we talked about the glue thoroughness, doing the little things, the morning routine, the daily tasks, with the dignity of a king.
Because the big things take care of themselves if the little things are perfect.
It really is an architecture of character. It's not about feeling good. It's about building strong.
And a building that is built strong doesn't just protect the builder. It provides shelter for everyone around them. That's the ultimate goal. You build yourself so you can be a refuge for others.
I love that. Now, before we sign off, we always like to leave our listener with a specific thought to chew on, something to take this from theory to practice.
Right. Here is the challenge based on James Allen's wisdom. Identify one adverse condition in your life right now. Maybe it's a debt, a difficult relationship, or just a general feeling of stagnation.
And instead of complaining about it,
Instead of complaining, ask yourself two questions. First, what lesson is this trying to teach me? And second, which brick in my foundation is missing?
Yeah.
Are you lacking energy? Are you lacking system? Are you lacking integrity?
don't try to fix the world, try to fix the pillar.
Exactly. Fix the pillar and watch how the roof stabilizes.
That is a powerful place to leave it. Thank you for guiding us through this blueprint today.
It was a pleasure to explore it.
And to our listener, good luck with your building. We'll see you in the next deep dive.